Okay, our next speaker is Ellen Thomas, Dictyorhabdus, priscus. What is it, and what can it teach us? Was I close?
Not at all. Hello, so I'm Ellen Thomas. I'm at Wesleyan University, and in my daytime job, I'm a micropaleontologist who works with foraminifera. And so I do not really know anything about sub-objects as Dictyorhabdus priscus. However, over the last 2 years, I've gotten involved in a project of dealing with an orphan collection at Wesleyan University, and most of my time I'm dealing with invertebrates. And so, this is Dictyorhabdus priscus. And as you can see, I have not chosen this for its particular beauty or anything like this. And if any of you knows what it is, please tell me. So what I found out when my students were going to many drawers of cabinets stored in the basement and in hallways, they came upon a whole drawer with things like this. We have 35 or 36 or so bits and pieces of rock with one or more of those funny specimens on them. And they were in a cabinet labeled vertebrates. And so they didn't look like anything that I linked up to vertebrates. Luckily, however, there was a label which said Dictyorhabdus priscus, and it was described first by Charles Doolittle Walcott in 1892. And so I checked what paper it was published in, and it was published in this paper called Preliminary Notes on the Discovery of a Vertebrate Fauna in Silurian Ordovician Strata. It was published in volume 3 of the Bulletin of the Geological Society of America. And it was mentioned where this came from. It came from a place called the Harding Sandstone Quarry in Canyon City, Colorado. And it was described as Trenton 8, what nowadays we call Middle Ordovician. And if you know something about vertebrate evolution, you know that Middle Ordovician is very old for things that we call vertebrate. And so it turned out that Charles Doolittle Walcott of Burgess Shale fame was working for the United States Geological Survey in the 1890s. And he had heard from some colleagues that there were interesting invertebrates to be found at Canyon City in this specific quarry. So he went there in 1890 because he was very much interested in Trenton 8 material, which he knew from the eastern United States. And he indeed found abundant invertebrates, but he also found a number of things that he described as the scales of ostracoderms, which are those jawless armored vertebrates that evolved largely and diversified in the Devonian. And so he excitedly described two genera, Astraspis and Eri, and here I have to look, Eri something. And so he described those two taxa of well-known ostracoderm fish, jawless fish. However, there was a third thing, and that was this. And so he called it Dictyorhabdus priscus, and at the time he thought it was the ossified sheath of the chorda of fish related to chimerids. And so I had no idea what chimerid fish are or what their caudal sheaths are and why they should be calcified. So I did some reading there. And then I started to realize that no one now anymore thinks that this has anything to do with chimerid fishes, which evolved much later than the Middle Ordovician. So at some time later, people looked at this material, and it was argued it was a cephalopod. At some later time, it was argued it was a sponge, a glass sponge in the Hexactinellidae. And if you check fossil works, then it still says that Dictyorhabdus priscus Walcott is a glass sponge. It doesn't look like any sponge that I knew. It didn't look like any cephalopod that I knew. And my students were really excited about seeing that there are things that you can argue are, you know, some kind of form of life, of which no one knows what phylum we actually going to put them in. And so they got really excited about it, and it's good to see in your students. And so they said, can we do something to try and recognize this? And they'd seen glass sponges in our collection, and they said, well, you know, can we analyze what material it is that we find out what its chemical composition is? And so we set up an appointment for the scanning electron microscope, and we analyzed that white material over there, and it's apatite, calcium phosphate. And so my students got really excited and said, yeah, Walcott was right, it's a vertebrate. Because there's not that many phyla that use apatite as their material, as we do in our bones and their teeth. And so if you looked at the collections, they have specimens of this at the Smithsonian as well as at the Yale Peabody. And nowadays they indeed classify them as chordates, not vertebrates but chordates. But they put them in the group of jawless fish that is related to the lampreys. Those kind of disgusting living egg-netted fish that live as parasites on all kinds of other animals. And so what I thought was kind of exciting about this was that it got my students really excited about figuring out what taxonomy is and how we recognize specific phyla. It got me really excited because I realized that we have this undescribed material in our collections, of which there is a little bit of material in the Smithsonian, a little bit at the Peabody, but we have, as this material goes, a relatively large number of specimens. And no one who works in this material is aware that we actually have a whole drawer full of those things. And they are from the type locality where Walcott collected, and where he actually sent Ward Loper to collect in a year that he didn't have time to go there, 1891. And Ward Loper was a curator at the Wesleyan Museum. And so this material was specifically collected under supervision of Walcott, and so it is material from the type locality. And that made me realize that it's high time that we go and digitize our collection and get the information online. Thank you.